Good morning. This is a meeting of the Joint Legislative Management Committee. It is June 28th, 2021. We have just a few items on the agenda this morning. Thank you all for being here. The first item of business is a review of the NCSL proposal for developing a compensation plan. So for folks who might be tuning in or watching this later, we recently hired an HR director for the legislative branch, Arling Donovan, and she will join us to take us through the proposal for developing a compensation plan. Arlene, are you able to join us? Good morning, there you are. We can't hear you, Arlene. I wonder if your volume's down.
Hear me any better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good morning. I'm Arling Donovan, the HR director for the legislature, and I am going to walk you through a very short proposal. It's just 3 pages long, so it shouldn't take very long, that we've received recently from the NCSL. So I think, Mike, you're going to go ahead and share it with us. Okay, great, thank you. So just to refresh everyone's memory, a few months ago, we reached out to NCSL to ask them to provide us with a proposal to do 2 things. The first was to review and update a compensation market study for the legislative staff. The last one was done 3 years ago. So it was time to update that information. And then in conjunction with that, we also wanted a proposal to create a sustainable compensation structure, which is also something that NCSL had recommended be done a few years ago. So we're now at the point where I think we're ready to do that work. If you look at the top of page 1, Mike, you'll just see a very high level overview. So I'll just give you a summary of what it says. This is an overview of what's documented in the next 3 pages, and then I'll go over just a bit more of the detail. So the NCSL in this proposal will be providing us 3 staff members to conduct this work over a 6-month period, which is a reasonable amount of time to get this amount of work done. They have a few objectives that you can see listed here in numbers 1 through 4. So the first is to create a job classification structure for all of our job titles. We have just over 50 job titles for them to look at. The next piece, they would be conducting a comparable market study. That's where they would be updating that market information for each of our job titles. And then they would create compensation ranges that correspond to the structure that they build. And then at the end of a 6-month period, they would be making recommendations as to all 3 of those items to us. If the proposal...
Excuse me, Arlene, this is Jane. Am I on? I ended up in the live streaming. I just want to confirm that I'm heard and that I'm on the legislative link.
Yes, I can hear you, and you are on the committee link.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had to give my permission to be live streamed or some darn thing. I don't know.
Well, we can definitely hear you, and you're on with us.
All right, thank you.
So they would be conducting this work. If this proposal is approved, they would start the work in August, and they would hopefully be able to finish it and present it to us by February, barring any unforeseen circumstances. We would be asked to pay 50% of the cost, as I'd mentioned before, And they've now projected that cost, our share of the cost, to be $27,000, which I will review in a little bit more detail as we get to the third page. Mike, if you could just scroll down just a bit. So here's where they focus on some of the key activities. So those are the activities that I'd mentioned just a bit ago. One thing that I would like to point out is that they will be using a point factor analysis to conduct this work. That's one of about 5 or 6 different compensation models that are typically used when compensation work is done. It's a common model. It's quite a bit of undertaking because it ranks all of the positions by a value point basis. There's a lot of background work that needs to go into that work. And then the positions are grouped accordingly, and salary bands are assigned to each of those groups. And then going forward, it would be our responsibility to maintain this structure and stay within the salary bands as appropriate. Okay, Mike, you can go to the next page, please. So the second page outlines what they project would be the work that they would conduct over the 6-month period starting in August. So in summary, they will be working on gathering information regarding all of the job titles that we currently have in place. They would be working closely with the directors and the managers and staff and leadership here at the legislature to conduct this work to make sure that they have a solid understanding of what all of the positions entail. And then they will be meeting with the staff. In this particular time, they will be meeting with us for the majority of this work virtually, but they have factored in 2 on-site meetings here in Montpelier, one at the midpoint of this work and one at the end to make those recommendations to us. So they'll be reviewing current job descriptions. They'll be speaking with the staff about their job responsibilities. One thing that I would like to add is that I also will be reaching out to the directors of each of our offices, probably at the end of the summer, to help update and or create job descriptions using a uniform template. That will help me as we move forward with this work, and it will also certainly help NCSL as they come in and they review all of this information regarding our positions here. Moving just on to the third page, which is our last page, you can see a summary of their cost breakdown. So again, we would be expected to pay 50% of the total cost, which comes to about a little over $59,000. So our portion that we would be paying for would pay for 50% of the staff salary and benefits, and that would be the 3 staff members who would be working on this project, as well as their travel costs. And they projected their travel costs, you can see under that travel box, to be about $5,900. And so Mike, if you scroll down just a bit to the end, you can see that our share would be the 50% of the salary and benefits for those 3 staff members, as well as their travel costs, which comes to a total of about $27,000. NCSL would be sharing the other piece, which would be about $32,000. So now I'd open it up to any questions if anyone has any to ask.
I see
do.
Senator Kitchell's hand.
Thank you. I'm having trouble this morning, I think. One of the things that we've experienced in appropriations over the years, and that is disjuncture between areas of Vermont state government in terms of compensation. We experienced it with, for example, the attorneys in the state's attorney's office, and then, of course, the Attorney General's office. And so there, even though the legislature is a separate branch of government, there's an awful lot of examination in terms of how salaries are aligned for comparable positions within Vermont state government as a whole. So my question here, and obviously NCSL has got expertise, and this is a very modest amount of money to bring 3 people and so forth in. But the extent to which we would be doing some comparables within Vermont state government so that we find that we are aligned with other compensation. Otherwise, it's amazing how, people compare the salaries and they're saying, we're either way under or we're way higher. So I was just wondering how we would be able to get confirmation that ultimately this compensation is not going to be an outlier relative to the rest of Vermont government.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I have spoken to these 3 members at NCSL on multiple occasions, and they will also be speaking with our staff, our managers and directors, to ask what they feel should be included as comparables, because I know that there's a lot of discussion about this. We did do a market review 3 years ago with NCSL, and I think we've learned from that last study as well. So they do understand that we are looking for them to do some comparables with our other branches of government, especially in some specific positions. Mm-hmm. I've also asked them to look at other areas of the market outside of the government branches, particularly where there's relevant market data, like for IT, for instance, comes to mind, perhaps Capitol Police and some other positions. So I have raised that to them, and they have assured me that they will be looking at those comparable data points as well.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Leclerc and Joe Benning's on deck.
Good morning. Good morning, Arling. I'm looking through the information they're going to need to do this study. I guess my question would be, are we ready for it? In other words, I see that they're looking for job descriptions. Do we have job descriptions for everybody, and is information in place that they're going to need to do this study?
So Representative Leclerc, it's actually, it's done in 2 pieces. So the answer is, I think we will be ready to do the work that NCSL would like to do, because there'll be 2 things going on simultaneously. The first thing is that NCSL will be asking us to complete electronic job questionnaires for each of our positions. And they'll be doing that in conjunction with our department directors and managers and some staff members. They did that before as well. And I did take a look at that template form, and it is quite extensive. So they'll be expecting us to complete those for all of our job positions. It asks all kinds of information. What are the duties and tasks, similar to a job description, education required, licenses and certifications, what the work environment is like. And it's extensive, as I said. Simultaneously, I will be asking our directors and managers to also complete or update their job descriptions. There are quite a few job descriptions in place. They may need some updating in some cases. And in others, we may need to create them. We have some new positions here and some new job titles. But I think that by the time NCSL needs this information in place, they will have requested it with plenty of notice. And I think that those 2 items can be done simultaneously.
So if I hear you correctly, then most of the information they're going to be needing to do this will come primarily from the questionnaires that they're going to be using, as opposed to having some sort of job description on file already.
That's right. And the job descriptions are very close to what I would consider to be information that goes into a job description.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Benning.
Good morning, Arlene. I'm trying to bring myself up to the vernacular. You used the term salary band, and I know that there are certain elements that one would plug into examining who gets paid what. But the old-fashioned concept of does one person work harder and better than another factor into that when they're determining salary or not?
So that's a great question. that I was going to bring up at the very end of our conversation. So the short answer is that there's two pieces of work that need to be done. And the first piece of the work needs to be completed as according to this proposal. So that would be the work NCSL would conduct, which is establishing a compensation study for our 50 or so, maybe 55 job titles, and then creating a salary structure around that. The second piece is what I think you're referencing, which would need to be done on our end. And that is taking all of the information for all of our staff, looking at their experience, their history, their resumes, degrees, and whatnot, as compared to the individual positions, and slotting them accordingly into a salary band, which is part of this umbrella salary structure, if that makes sense. So the structure would be completed, and we would have a range, a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum for each of these groupings of positions. And then the second piece is the work that would need to be done on our end, which is looking at the individual staff members and making sure that they are aligned accordingly within their salary bands that have been created by NCSL.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Speaker?
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one, Arlene, after reviewing this, I really appreciate how comprehensive this is and just how clear the objectives are. Are you comfortable with the timeline laid out here? I just have concerns about everything that we're juggling right now with space and lots of things. We're hiring lots of positions. Just wanted to get your gut check on how that timeline looks and if that does seem reasonable.
Yeah, it's a great question. They originally had this slated to start earlier, and we pushed it back because I did feel like, we're, like you said, there's so much going on. NCSL likewise has a lot happening. They have some larger in-person sessions and seminars that they're taking on as well. I guess what I would say is I think 6 months is reasonable. The timeline is really something that I think is open for discussion, and we could certainly move it. It's not set in stone at all, not on our side, and it's not set in stone on the side of NCSL either. So I think if we feel like it's, too aggressive, we can move it up. I think they were trying to be mindful of the session start date, January, and everyone gets so busy during that time frame as well, trying to not have us juggling too much during the session. But I guess I can certainly open that up to all of you for discussion.
Just to be clear, I don't have objections to the timeline. I just wanted to make sure that there was discussion about it and that the stakeholders around the table felt comfortable with it. Just again, given the level of work that we're doing. The other quick question I have is just around this, the database, the ERI compensation database. Is that a tool that you have access to year round, or is that just specific to this project? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that is just specific to this project. The ERI is the Economic Research Institute. It's a large association commonly used to conduct market research. There's a lot of competitors out there. This happens to be one of them. But this looks like a rate that would only be for a one-time use. Typically, to have access to market information going forward would be an annual fee, and it would be much more than probably the $5,000 that they've listed here.
Great. Thank you, Arlene.
You're welcome.
Representative Colston?
Thank you. Good morning. Arlene, I see that the study allows for some flexibility in the report that would be generated if more time is needed. But should the study require more staff time, it's a lot more involved than anticipated, how might that be handled?
Are you, Representative Colston, are you referencing staff time on behalf of NCSL or on behalf of Human Resources?
NCSL, which we share a cost in.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is their proposal a cap? So they're locked into making it work, or is there any provisions for extending it, and what would that look like?
So this, as we see it right now, this is a cap. There was an exception in this proposal if they needed additional salary survey information, which is usually a few $100s for, say, market information outside of ERI that they may need from another source. If they need additional staff or additional time, that's something that we would have to certainly revisit with them. That was not rolled into this proposal. They were confident that they could get it done within 6 months with their 3 staff members.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Ansel?
Thank you. I've got a couple questions. One of them has to do with the timeline, and just looking at the February possible finish date, and understanding that there's work that we have to do once we get the report, and that employees are understandably going to be anxious about the study and where they fit and so on. Is it anticipated that we will do we being the legislature and this committee in particular, that we will do our part of this work mid-session? Is that the idea, so that decisions will have been made before July 1, which is typically when salaries get adjusted? Is that the thinking?
Yes, it would be. So if this work is able to be completed by February, then that next piece of the work would start as soon as the structure is completed. And as long as we have the ample resources, which I'm hoping to have, then it should be doable.
And is that part of the work done by the managers or by this committee or jointly, or sort of how does that process happen?
So typically that second piece would happen between Human Resources and the directors and the managers. A lot of it is review work, looking at direct experience of staff, tenure, where they fall in the structure and things like that, which I fully anticipate I would need the help of the directors and managers for. But a lot of it is review, provided that we have the information, as we discussed earlier, readily available in the job descriptions and resumes of staff and access to the managers and directors, then it would be completed that way.
And I have another question, if I could. Understanding that this is we did this 3 years ago. We're doing it now. It takes 6 months or so to do. Is the product that we get something that we have to do this again in 3 years, or is it supposed to be a product that that is, now that we have you on board, is something that we can keep updated and keep current without doing this sort of a major study?
So this is supposed to be a sustainable, maintainable project by us, by Human Resources. So typically when a structure is in place, you would maintain it by making sure that we are adding appropriate salary percentages at the end of every year, making sure that the cost of living is factored in so that people don't fall out of their salary band so quickly. It's supposed to grow along with the market. So it should be sustainable. Normally, with market studies like this, you do a deep dive review of the market every several years. But as long as we are keeping up accordingly and maintaining it accordingly and doing our part, it should be something that is sustainable going forward.
Good, thank you.
Senator Kitchell?
Yes, I wanted to go back to Senator Benning's question because maybe I missed it. It's not only experience and skills, but there's also, we have variation in performance, and sometimes people will satisfactorily meet the requirements of the position and others will routinely exceed. So within that band, I just wanted to confirm that there is a way of compensating for that evaluation of the performance of the individual incumbent. There might be multiple members of that class, but you may find variation in salary simply because of the quality and volume and superior work performed. So I just wanted to confirm that that band allows for that that differentiation of compensation based on performance, actual performance.
So that's something that we'll have to discuss with NCSL. Right now, the salary bands are going to be set according to market data. And typically there will be room for merit-based increases. One thing that is imperative with work like this is to make sure that the process for reviewing merit or performance is done by all offices in the same way across the board. And that is something that I just haven't had an opportunity to investigate. I do believe that there are various levels of performance measurement across the offices in place. I just haven't had an opportunity to see what that looks like. Ideally, it's something that would be done at the same time in uniform.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I know like in the rest of state government, there is a provision for merit adjustments, and there's a review. I mean, a supervisor doesn't just simply hand them out. There's got to be a rationale, justification, and a second or more of an independent kind of a review committee. So it's something that it shouldn't be done lightly because it does obviously create some compensation differences among employees. So thank you.
Looking around, any other questions for Arlene? Arlene, anything else that you'd like to share with us on this matter?
No, I think that I've covered it all, as long as I've answered all of your questions.
Okay. Thank you so much, Arlene. Stand by. For our next agenda item, we're going to be talking about a personnel matter, and I am looking for a vote to go. Do you have a question, Janet? You're muted.
Are we supposed to take action on this? Do you want a motion to approve this proposal, or are we just being informed?
At this point, we're just being informed.
Okay.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm looking for a vote to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter. We have a motion. Okay, Senator Mazza, thank you. Do I need a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Representative Leclerc, and all those in favor, if you could show a show of hands, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Clearly we have 2/3 majority. So we will now ask everyone to head into, everybody else who's not part of the committee to log off, and